we'll go to Shelby, Montana for the spectacle that was Dempsey versus Gibbons.
Heavyweight champion of the world Jack Dempsey limbers up in excellent humor, and with good reason. He's been guaranteed $300,000 to fight Tommy Gibbons, the #1 ranking challenger for Dempsey's heavyweight crown. Tommy Gibbons, only 5 foot 9.5 inches tall, expects to weigh approximately 184 pounds. Always a dedicated trainer, Tommy's 32 years old now and knows he has to be even more relentless than ever in readying himself for this fight. A brilliant boxer, Tommy plans to go all the way, 15 rounds with the man whose dynamite punching power is already being compared with the legendary John L. Sullivan.
Freedom.
After beating George Carpentier to retain the heavyweight title, Jack Dempsey took a couple of years off. He busied himself with a horse racing stable and was seen at racetracks across the country. Meanwhile, in 1921, Tommy Gibbons made a name for himself by scoring 21 knockouts, 10 in the first round, as he made his way toward a shot at the heavyweight crown. That opportunity came when real estate speculators in the tiny northwestern Montana town of Shelby, population 500, decided they wanted to put their burg on the map, and they would do it by hosting a heavyweight title fight. They contacted Jack "Doc" Kearns, Dempsey's manager, and offered him $200,000 to bring a Dempsey title defense to Shelby. Sitting in his office in New York, Kearns jumped at the opportunity. The fight was set for July 4th, 1923. Kearns had talked the Shelby backers into paying $300,000 up front for the fight. A stadium was built, extra train tracks were laid, and newspapers across the country followed the story. But as the Shelby Bank struggled to raise funds for the fight, one organizer offered Kearns 50,000 sheep as part of the payment. Kearns wondered appropriately, what the hell am I going to do with 50,000 sheep in New York? With the money in jeopardy, there would be no fight. On July 1st, the fight was called off, but it wasn't long before Kearns and the promoters came to terms, and the fight was back on. So let's go to Shelby, Montana, a town built on oil and destroyed by boxing, and check out the chaos that was Jack Dempsey versus Tommy Gibbons, Independence Day, 1923.
Shelby, Montana, just 40 miles from the Canadian border. The imaginative businessmen of Shelby decided to put their little oil town on the map by staging a heavyweight championship prize fight. An hour before the fight, the new wooden stadium is almost empty, and there's a noticeable absence of activity across the tent-dotted prairie. Look closely. In the background is downtown Shelby. At the right, on top of the hill, hundreds of non-paying customers are expecting to get their thrills long distance. 1 hour later, challenger Tommy Gibbons enters the ring for the biggest fight of his life. Champion Dempsey glances back at Tommy's corner. Gibbons seems quite unconcerned, doesn't pay any attention to Dempsey. To the champion's left, outside the ropes, his shrewd manager, Jack "Doc" Kearns. An utter shock to any promoter, those many thousands of empty seats surrounding the ring. Dempsey and Gibbons get their final instructions from the referee as the crowd eagerly waits for the title fight to begin. Gibbons tests the traction in the center of the ring. A fine boxer like Tommy wants that canvas to be extremely taut. Now, just moments away from the start of round 1. Both fighters touch gloves as this World Heavyweight Championship fight gets underway. Gibbons ties Dempsey up immediately. Tom knows Dempsey's style of steamrolling his opponents in the first 2 minutes of round 1. No secret that Jack Dempsey's interpretation of a good performance is the fight he ends prior to round 2. As the referee breaks the clinch, Dempsey lands 3 crisp left hooks to the body. The same left hooks that fractured 3 ribs of heavyweight champion Jess Willard 4 years ago, when Dempsey won the heavyweight championship in Toledo, Ohio. Dempsey is putting tremendous pressure on Gibbons here in round 1. Jack's trying viciously to get in the big punch to end it, as he's done so many times in the past 6 years. In rounds 2 and 3, Dempsey relentlessly pursued Gibbons all over the ring, but Tommy slipped and ducked the champion's big guns, using all of the brilliant defensive tactics which have made him one of the most respected boxers of the era. Dempsey in white, Gibbons in black. Tommy turned pro in 1911, 12 years ago. He's had 92 fights, losing only 2 decisions during his entire professional career. Gibbons, never knocked off his feet, is widely regarded as the finest boxer in the heavyweight division. The end of round 4. Gibbons has effectively neutralized Dempsey's attempt to get him out of there with one big punch. But Tommy has a long way to go. Gibbons took round 6 from the champion. Tommy landed effectively while continuing to be an elusive target to the champion's left-hand bomb. Dempsey throws 2 vicious left-right combinations at Gibbons. Jack isn't accustomed to seeing his opponent still standing after taking any one of those particular blasts. Dempsey wants this to be lucky round 7. He's putting constant pressure on the challenger, and Tommy tries desperately to tie up the champion and then get away. The champion in white. Watch Jack attack again with more bone-crushing punches. The referee tries to separate the 2 men, but he's having his problems. Dempsey jumps in with a blistering right hand to the head, and Gibbons finds himself halfway out of the ring. Round 7 comes to an end with Gibbons surprising everyone with his brilliant defense.
Now available for the first time ever on home video, the best of the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast.
What a night! Who are we honoring?
Jokes, jabs, insults, and put-downs. That's what made these roasts hilarious.
This is ESPN Classic.
Rounds 8, 9, and 10 were all Dempsey. Gibbons effectively tied up the champion periodically, but it's Jack who lands all the effective punches. Challenger Gibbons in the dark trunks. There were hundreds of little towns like Shelby, Montana in 1923. but it took the courageous businessmen of Shelby to offer the champion the unheard-of guarantee of $300,000 to defend his title in their little oil town. Their purpose was to put Shelby, Montana on the map. They succeeded, but unfortunately, the exorbitant guarantee practically bankrupted the town after the fight was over. Round 11 has been another session with Gibbons effectively boxing and tying up the champion. Here at the end of the round, Tommy is still in there, but he's way behind on points. Rounds 12, 13, and 14 were all Dempsey's. Jack continues to press Gibbons all over the ring, but couldn't land that one big punch to take Tommy out. The fighters touch gloves for the 15th and final round. Just 3 more minutes and Gibbons will have gone the distance, achieving the distinction of being the first challenger to carry Dempsey to the 15-round limit. Jack continues to try for a knockout. It appears the master boxer is going to do it. This is Tommy's 103rd fight, and he's yet to be knocked off his feet. He's given away 15 pounds to the dynamite-punching Jack Dempsey, which very few boxing experts believed he could do. Tommy holds on now. Less than a minute to go, and he's determined to hang in there. The fighters will momentarily be completely lost to our cameraman, who can't follow the action to the extreme left corner. But if you look closely, you can see the shadows of the fighters on the canvas. It's all over. The referee raises the hand of Jack Dempsey, awarding the champion a 15-round decision. Just 20 minutes later, Jack Dempsey and his manager Jack "Doc" Kearns were on a train leaving town after grabbing the last $56,000 left in the till. So on July 4th, 1923, the far-sighted businessmen of Shelby, Montana made their indelible impression on boxing history, but not without paying a tremendous price.
On paper, the folks in Shelby got their money's worth in terms of actual boxing. The fight went the distance, but the Shelby Banks could go no further. With the small crowd of roughly 10,000, plus the scores of gatecrashers, the boxing world soon knew this fight as the Sack of Shelby. Right after the fight, Doc Kearns took off in a private train, toting the gate receipts in canvas bags and leaving behind a bankrupt town. Tommy Gibbons scored a moral victory of sorts when he survived the 12th round to set a new record for longevity against Dempsey, and another when he survived the 15th and forced the fight to a decision. After his boxing career, in which he had won 90 of 92 fights before meeting Dempsey, Gibbons served 24 years as sheriff in Minnesota. There, the man who had once been bold enough to stand up to Jack Dempsey would become better known as the man who was bold enough to stand up to John Dillinger. Some fight observers said that Dempsey did not go all out in Shelby because he had had all the money up front. Regardless, it was his 4th successful title defense, and a colorful one at that. The front page of the Shelby newspaper, appropriately called the Shelby Promoter, proclaimed the town as the Tulsa of the Northwest, a headline based on the hope that the Dempsey-Gibbons fight would bring boomtown status to Shelby. Some 80 years after the fight, Shelby's population is roughly 2,500 souls, just 2,000 more than the day Doc Kearns and Jack Dempsey broke the banks and sacked the town. When we return, I'll have some closing thoughts on Jack Dempsey as we head for the final bell.
Why do I rent from Enterprise?
Story behind every hook, jab, and knockout from fights that are totally
Uncut.
Sugar Ray's Hit Parade. Tuesday at 9, only on ESPN Classic.
So close to the action, you got to duck.
Are you old school?
Jack Dempsey was not the most active heavyweight champ in history. He held the title for 7 years and defended it only 6 times, the last unsuccessfully against Gene Tunney. But each of his matches were such big events that he was still able to carve out legendary status in the Roaring '20s. Only months after his 1923 bout with Tommy Gibbons, Dempsey's match with Argentine Luis Firpo was to become one of his defining moments. He knocked Firpo down 7 times in 2 rounds, but hit the canvas twice himself. Once Jack was knocked through the ropes into a row of reporters who simply shoved him back into the ring. Firpo finally stayed down in round 2, another victim of the power of the Manasseh Mauler. And never did a nickname seem so apt than on that night in 1923, and indeed in the matches we saw on this edition of Big Fights Boxing Hour. I'm Al Bernstein. We'll see you next time.
This is ESPN Classic, the Classic Sports Network.